No, we only need 3. I think, yeah, we're good. So, exactly. So what I want to do is, nope, skip that one. Nope, yep. There we go. So we're going to go on to our last panel. And our last panel is all about bringing it home. So what we've done is we have invited 3 distinguished Bermudians. Hello, welcome home. 3 distinguished Bermudians to come talk to us a little bit about what it is that they've learned in working overseas and what knowledge and insight they can help bring home to us here in Bermuda as a result. And one of the things that we realized as we looked at the hospitality needs assessment and what sort of skills that Bermuda was going to need over the next couple of years is, yes, there are hospitality jobs as we have traditionally imagined them, but we are also going to need more Bermudians with expertise in building and design and in placemaking. And we're going to need Bermudians in related field like marketing, thank goodness, and communication. And so we have 3 panelists up here who I think are going to take a few minutes first to tell us a little bit about who they are. Because the slides are in that order, Darren, I think we're going to start with you. Okay. Do you want to take a few minutes and tell us about yourself and how you came to be sitting up here?
Great. Can
you sure can.
Hi, my name is Darren Baskin,
Yep. Can you guys hear Darren?
No. Right.
There you go. Here's that one.
Awesome. My name is Darren Baskin. I'm the managing director and founder of Proverb. We're a brand agency based in Boston, and prior to that, grew up here on the island. And the way that we kind of sort of found our way into starting the company was that I sort of worked in agencies for a bit, found myself into the world of exhibit design, and wound up working on exhibits all over the world, so in Australia, in Barcelona, Taiwan. And part of what's really interesting about that work is that you start out by working with someone who's really smart. You sort of winnow that down to sort of 1 or 2 points that they can really live with. And then you wrap a story around that. And then you take that story and you align all these different disciplines to tell that same story. So if you can get a writer, an architect, filmmaker, a light designer, a docent to tell that story, you really can create something that is immersive. And so Proverb was really sort of launched with that idea in mind. So at the company, almost everything that we do really revolves around placemaking or place branding. So from luxury and design-driven multifamily or apartment buildings, high-performance office buildings. We work on new commercial neighborhoods. We also work with municipalities to help drive economic development. A lot of the work that we do really kind of comes down to 2 central ideas. How do we develop what we call a valuable brand, so something that allows you to move forward in time and gain greater clarity, but also desirability. And then secondly, sort of how do we use design and design thinking to build a more thoughtful sense of community? How do you bring people together with a real clear sense of shared purpose? And so the reasons why we find that this matters is that in a cycle like the one that we're in right now, where there's so much new product, if you travel to any of the major cities entering the market, and even if these are sort of buildings that are amenitized at an exceptionally high level, you're really looking at sort of how do you differentiate, and so it's one thing to be brand new, it's a whole other thing to sort of show up and be able to do something that really is distinct, and so if you think about sort of where one lives, it's an incredibly personal decision. It's up there with who you're going to live with or who you're going to live without. And,
we'll get to why he touched
and so you're really always sort of thinking a bit about sort of how you can differentiate, and so, this is an example of a building called the Bat in Boston. And it was the former Charleston Shoe Factory, and so you're even looking at small opportunities like a door pull to sort of brand that environment. the way in which we kind of go about doing that is really by developing what we call a brand truth. We're big believers that powerful brands are almost always connected to purpose-driven organizations, and that idea can really help to inform, not just an advertising campaign or something along those lines, but really sort of the whole supporting experience. So I'll show you an example of one of these projects. This was an apartment building that we just delivered a few months ago. It's in a neighborhood called Everett, Massachusetts. It's one of the cities just outside of Boston. This is a heavily challenged community. I would imagine that most people in this room haven't been to Everett for any particular reason. Largely industrial, very much blue collar. It's now home to the new Wynn Casino. And, and this is our third project in that market. And, and so if in what we do in terms of placemaking, it's really focused on, how do you create a reason for someone to want to be here? If you went to this site 5 years ago, it was sandwiched between scrap metal yards, and today, what we've been able to do in developing the brand is really use a set of ideas to help drive architectural decisions, drive programming decisions, hospitality, and so for this type of a tenant, who's largely someone with a master's degree, student loans, and might have sort of fairly limited options in terms of what they could access in a market like Boston that's as expensive as it is. What we've been able to do is to invite them to come to a new neighborhood, explore that, and create a pretty compelling value proposition in and around that. And so through the brand, we've been able to drive decisions in terms of architecture, in terms of FF&E. We even did a collaboration with Woolrich, the blanket company, as a move-in gift, as well as something that was used for upholstery. We wound up doing collaborations with a local brewery, Night Shift, and so we've done these growlers as part of the move-in package. At the Pioneer, beer is on tap 24 hours a day, kombucha's on tap 24 hours a day. We developed an incredible sort of web experience and really tried to sort of tell the story of everything that you can access in terms of sort of our proximity to other things that you might want to get to. So these types of ideas are showing up sort of more and more so in where someone lives on a daily basis. The idea of sort of taking cues from hospitality, from resorts, are things that are integrated into people's daily lives. These ideas are showing up in the workplace. And so for us, if hospitality is really core to our business, we really need to figure out sort of how do we differentiate that as we move forward.
So I have many questions, but first, let's hear from Claire.
Great.
And then Richard.
Thanks. Can you all hear me? Hi. I'm going to keep this light and tight because you guys have been here for so many hours. My name's Claire O'Connor. I'm the editorial director of an app called Bumble. Hands up if you've heard of it. Okay. Oh my gosh, this is better than I expected. I would do hands up if you've used it, but I don't want anyone to feel embarrassed. What about, I don't know, extramarital trysts, whatever you're doing out there, it's your business. Before taking over content for Bumble, I had a long career in journalism. I actually see some former colleagues from the Royal Gazette / Mid-Ocean News. Yep. Yeah, a couple sort of tentative hands. Great training. From the Royal Gazette, went and did a master's degree in the US, and then wound up at Forbes, the business outlet, for 8 years. My last 2 years at Forbes, I chose my own beat, which is the subject you cover. And I decided there weren't enough business news stories about women entrepreneurs and workplace equality, which are two topics that are obviously inextricably linked. So I took on that beat. The last cover story I wrote for Forbes was on this, at the time, 27-year-old incredible woman who had launched Bumble at age 25. A few months after the story came out, she hired me to be her first editorial director. She is still my CEO, she's still the youngest woman to run $1 billion plus tech company. I work with a company of 95% women in leadership, which, if you have the opportunity to ever do so, yeah, right? We're 46% non-white. It's the most diverse place I've ever worked. One of the obvious lessons coming out of that is the more creativity The more diversity you put in, the more creativity you get out. So what I do at Bumble is oversee, editorial director is a strange title. What I do at Bumble is oversee sort of everything written. We have a lot of own channels. We have a kind of content hub, which is a glorified name for a blog, but I'm going to go with Content Hub. We have a glossy magazine in conjunction with Hearst that I launched last spring. We have content in our app. We have video content all over the place. As you can imagine with a company this size, I mean, we have 70 million users across 6 continents. So what I actually did want to show you in lieu of slides, because a journalist and editor, I don't know how to make them. So I'm going to show you a video. This is really exciting and personal for me. Serena Williams, some of you may have heard of her. She is an investor in Bumble. I've gotten to know her a little bit through our Bumble Fund, which is a venture capital arm of the company. We only invest in women of color and those from underrepresented groups. So Serena has partnered with us. She has her own portfolio. If you don't know about it, you should look it up. She's an incredible investor. So as part of our work with her, we tapped her to be in our first Super Bowl ad this past year. It's the first Super Bowl commercial that was primarily made with women behind and in front of the lens. Women wrote it, women were behind the camera, women were doing, pulling things, the things that usually men do. And then of course Serena was in front of it. So I just wanted to show that 1-minute clip so you can kind of get a feel for the sort of company it is. Oh, and yes, Bumble is a dating and networking app. I didn't say that already.
The world tells you to wait, that waiting is polite, and good things will just come. But if I waited to be invited in, I never would have stood out. If I waited for change to happen, I never would have made a difference. So make the first move. Don't wait to be told your place. Take it. Don't wait for people to find you. Find them. In work, in love, in life. And most of all, don't wait to be given power, because here's what they won't tell you. We already have it.
'Cause I'm a soldier. Been through the fire. I started with nothing. I've got nothing to lose.
Great. So you have your other one. You want to skip your other one?
Hello everyone, my name is Richard Tucker. I am the Complex General Manager at the Assemblage, which is located in New York City. We are a co-living and co-working brand. We offer office space as well as hotel rooms and long-stay apartments. So it's a bit of a unique business model. The Assemblage is quite different from many of its competitors like the WeWorks or the Neuhauses of the world in the sense that we are focused on wellness. We do that through the food that we offer, which is inspired by an Ayurvedic cuisine. We also provide daily wellness and programming, which includes yoga, Kundalini, Reiki, breath work. We also do some really cool evening programming that has involved talks by Deepak Chopra, by Jay Shetty, and also by Iyanla Van Zandt recently. So it's a very cool offering that we have. I have a video here to show you to just give you a feel and idea of what the Assemblage is, and a little bit about myself. I grew up here in Bermuda. I've worked for a couple of the hotels here on the island, the Fairmont Hamilton Princess and Rosewood Tucker's Point. And had some great experiences with them, really got my foundation for managing hotels here in Bermuda and took that with me to New York, which has helped me to kind of get to where I am today.
Welcome to the Assemblage, a co-working, co-living, and community event space in New York. The Assemblage exists to foster collaboration and transformation for the future of humanity. Collaborative environments for co-working, private offices and conference rooms for focused work, adaptable communal spaces for intimate meetings, private events, or community gatherings. By day, we offer a number of custom-designed spaces to support your work, creativity, and your well-being. By night, the house comes alive with interactive events, musical performances, immersive workshops, and experiential lectures. our members enjoy complimentary wellness programming, from daily yoga to breathwork to sound meditation led by New York City's top facilitators, as well as Ayurvedic breakfast and lunch and plant-based elixirs at our alchemical apothecary. Our community is at the forefront of technology, consciousness, and capital. A sanctuary in the city where you can elevate yourself and your business. We exist so that you can exist more fully. Join the assemblage community.
That certainly doesn't look like any hotel we have today. Guys, those are three fascinating stories. I have lots of questions, and then if we have time, we can take some from the audience as well. Darren, I thought we'd start with you. I mean, each of you at some point made the decision, as I did 20 years ago, that your best next career step was outside of Bermuda. Darren, do you want to talk a little bit about what motivated you to do that?
Sure, yeah, and some of it's a little bit personal and some of it's professional. I'll share both. For anyone who knows me or knows a bit about me, my dad's also a jazz musician. He's a Berkeley graduate, as a composer. And I think it was, when he moved back to Bermuda, he was the musical director at this hotel for a while and other things. But I certainly kind of lived with sort of the frustration of not necessarily being able to access the career that he truly wanted to have, sort of just personally. And so I remember, when I was driving, when he was driving me to college, and in order to get in my house, you have to go up a steep hill, you go down a really steep hill, you go down an even steeper hill, and then you go down a really steep hill, and if you don't turn, you go overboard, right? And so we get up the first hill, and we go up the second hill, and we get about halfway up the hill, and it's just me and him in the car, and he turns to me, and he takes the car to gear, and he says, so, I don't want to hear anything about you changing your major. And you realize you may not really be able to come back. And it was one of these things where, once I stopped crying, I really sort of took that on in terms of, recognizing that what he really wanted me to do was to kind of move forward without a lot of self-imposed limits or sort of expectations of family or things along those lines. And so for me, it started out with sort of staying one more year post-graduation, and it really kind of turned into being able to get exposed to many different kinds of industries. We worked with companies of many different tiers. So.
Want to add, or I can ask you another question? Let's go to you, Richard. Sure. You have at least one proud parent and one proud great aunt in the room who would very much like you to come home. But can you tell us a little bit about how your decision to go away to change the direction of your career? Do you think you're in the place you would be now if you'd stayed in Bermuda?
I don't think so, and I'd like to recognize someone who's been important for my career growth, who's here in the audience today, and that's Mrs. Roydell Neverson. So everybody can just give her a round of applause. Roydell was instrumental in kind of seeing talent in a young Bermudian and investing in them by teaching them certain things within the industry, providing me with opportunities while I was here on the island. At the time, that wasn't really available for Bermudians, so I just want to thank her for that. Going to New York, I've been able to kind of grow in this industry so rapidly. I don't think that would have happened here on the island. or even in New York for that matter. It's a very unique situation that I'm in, but I've had some great opportunities, and it started with just making myself available to assist with different projects that included openings of hotels, being flexible to move to different cities and do that, which is very stressful at times. Doing transitions of hotels, and that's when a management company has kind of come to the end of their contract and a new management company is coming on board, and just managing that experience. And I've had some great mentors who have kind of looked at my talent and decided to invest in that just based on my performance. So I've been very lucky and blessed to have that. But I made the decision to move to the US so that I could get as much experience as possible, so that I could bring it back here to Bermuda and provide opportunities for other Bermudians. So that's really the main decision on why I chose to leave, so I could be in a position, if not the same, but better than Roydell's, to help empower other Bermudians to have opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And Claire, how about if we asked you the sort of same question from the other perspective, which is, you're in a role in an industry that didn't really exist when we were in school. What is it about your Bermuda experience that prepared you to do what you do today as well as you do it?
Well, do you know what? When I was 19 years old, as a baby intern at the Royal Gazette / Mid-Ocean News, I wasn't even allowed to use internet at my computer. I remember the editor at the time would just chuck a Yellow Pages at me and say, open a page and call someone and get a story. I think that, I know, but it really teaches you to think on your feet, I'll tell you that.
And to duck.
That too. No, lovely, we get along great now. This is not like an HR incident. But no, it really taught me to think on my feet, to be tenacious. No one wants a cold call. And I think from there, my love of reporting and journalism came from that. These years when I would go to college, come back, work on Parleville Road all summer, go away again. But at some point, I had to further my education, and there's a master's program I wanted to go to in New York, and I really wasn't sure if I would come back here, if I would be able to stay, the usual visa hoopla, but it just so happens I got a gig I couldn't turn down at Forbes, and a decade later, here I am. And again, you're right, a job that didn't exist a long time ago, but we all know how traditional media outlets are faring these days. So I think a lot of journalist editor types are now seeing startups like mine as a safer bet for a career.
Fantastic. Let's change course slightly and maybe hold on to the mic for a second, because this is a question I think I'd like each of you to answer, which is that the three of you are really at the coalface of some pretty interesting and innovative stuff. What are you seeing that you think Bermuda or this audience really should get ahead of and be aware of and thinking about that might not be because we're out here set apart from everybody else?
All right.
Yeah, you got the mic.
I have been doing a lot of research and digging through data lately. I think one thing we are lucky to have is data from 70 million users around the world, the average age of whom is 28. So we know what the youngs care about. And I think what we see is obviously right now, 27% of the US population is Gen Z. Gen Z are folks born 1995 and later, if you can believe there are people born 1995 or later who exist and have jobs and money. So I think what we've come to realize trying to market to them and learn about them is that they see through BS like no other generation. I'm a millennial, we do to a degree too, but these Gen Z folks, I mean, look at someone like Greta Thunberg. These are teenagers who are into activism. They hate being sort of overtly marketed to. They see through everything. And I think what they value the most is authenticity. So we've really had to make sure that when we're tailoring a message for these young folks, there's something behind it. I'll give you a quick example, then I'll pass the mic. After the Parkland High School shooting at Marguerite Douglas High in Florida last year, 2 years ago, there's too many shootings, I don't remember, but you remember which one I'm talking about. We decided at that point to ban all images of guns on our platforms, because believe it or not, there are people in America, mostly America, who like to have images of themselves posing with guns on a dating app. Strange, but we banned it right away. But we didn't just ban it because we're like, we don't want this to be seen as just some marketing ploy. So we got in touch with the young people behind March for Our Lives, and we made a $100,000 pledge, and we said, we're here for you, and we're going to fight with you. And I think when you put your money where your mouth is, that's important. But we also, I don't want to say stuck to our guns, because that's the worst. But we basically, we drew a line in the sand. How about that? We're in Bermuda. Drew a line in the sand where, I mean, there are people on the internet who are loud and wrong all the time. There were, gun nuts in America, this is going to ruin you, whatever. We had more people registering that day than most days ever. When you put your values first, is what I'm trying to get at, people take notice, especially young people, because they care too.
Well, and to just build on your point in terms of sort of just how empowered consumers are right now, and that everyone can smell BS as a mile away, and not only will they smell it, but they'll also turn around and Yelp about it, right? And so, for us, in terms of trends that I see, one is that, incredible consumer experience is its own product at this point. If you look at, the fact that Uber doesn't own any cars, WeWork owns less, next to no space, Airbnb doesn't really own bedrooms. And so more and more so, one is really sort of buying sort of this curated experience, really looking at the ways in which, these platforms or these products can really address, social needs, can address health needs, and so for us, this is showing up sort of more and more so in the projects that we take on. So for instance, Matimco is a client of ours, which is MIT's real estate development arm. So if you go to a neighborhood like Kendall Square is arguably the most invested square mile in the world. There's about $14 billion of venture capital that's parked in Kendall Square. They hired us to rebrand One Broadway, right? So this is a building that has $7 billion parked in it. It's home to Facebook, it's home to Apple, it's home to the Cambridge Innovation Center. And it's 98% leased, and so if it's not broken, why would you still choose to improve it? And so the idea really being that what they want to do is to become sort of, the ground zero or the convener for the entire neighborhood.
Those may not be good words either.
Yeah, and so the ground floor has really become sort of a living room for the entire neighborhood. And it's everything from lectures to, sort of a meeting space or what have you. And so, I say all that to say that it isn't just about sort of rooms or containers or things along those lines. It's much more around the ways in which we can address unmet needs.
Piggybacking off of what Claire said about just understanding and marketing toward the younger generations, millennials make up over a quarter of the US population, which translates to about 83 million people. And they, for the hotel industry at least, are really shaping what we offer, the experiences that we provide, the product in terms of the rooms, the shift from restaurant-centric hotels and resorts to more bar-centric. I think millennials want to be in environments where it's socially engaging. And a lot of that has to do with technology, right? And how that's kind of transformed and shaped our lives. We are always connected 24/7. I'm speaking as a millennial. I'm 29, by the way. Right. Forgot to mention that. With the hotels that I've been involved in for openings, we're always thinking about how do we keep people connected, right? And that comes down to the FF&E, making sure that there are charging ports at the bars, on whatever desks that we have in social areas, all of those things that you want to consider. Millennials are also more inclined to care about the environment and our impact on it. So what we're seeing is that hotels are becoming greener and healthier. So that comes down to the types of linens that you provide in the rooms or the food that you're providing, whether you're composting and recycling, all of that. It's important to the millennial traveler. And also, millennials are on track by 2020 to make up 50% of the workforce in the US. And Bernstein Research Group actually estimates that millennials will have more consumer spending power than baby boomers, right? And with that, they are open to spending more on experiences, unique experiences that are memorable. And that's why I think it's great what the Bermuda Tourism Authority is doing with really trying to push the cultural experiences, because it's something that I, as a consumer, would be interested in spending good money on if it's going to be something that's unique and that I can't get anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Claire, Claire, do you want to jump in there? Because I know you have, strong views around targeting. Millennials are obviously not a niche audience by any means, but when we talk about, targeting our adventure seekers and our experience enthusiasts, and even our active families, I mean, we know that they are increasingly diverse in every way. And I guess, Richard, you've talked a little bit about targeting African-American travelers, and I think that's something we come back to. But do you want to touch on that subject?
Yeah. I think something that I'm still baffled by 90% of the time with brands and other entities marketing out there is treating women as a niche. We're 51% of the population, and we're almost all of the spending power. It's completely
and the
wild.
majority of the decision makers when it comes to travel.
Right, and Bumble has managed to get to this point, multi-billion-dollar company with this reach all around the world by, we put out there a distinctly women-first message. Women make the first move in the app. We're trying to end misogyny by ensuring that the first interaction on the app is equitable and respectful. And we've really found the data proves out that when women do make the first move, there's less likely to be any nastiness. There's less, we actually don't allow what I'm going to call euphemistically lewd images, but you can imagine what I mean. There's less of that disrespectful behavior. So I think just taking women seriously as consumers and thinking about what they actually want. For instance, we did a poll or something in the app, just asking what women didn't want. And guess what they didn't want? Shirtless gym selfies from men. So don't post them, guys. But it's just, taking women seriously, thinking what they want. And the same goes for other audiences which are considered niche, which are huge tranches of the population. We actually have a baby brother app called Chappie. It's supposed to be an answer to Grindr, which I don't know if you know is the sort of existing king of the gay apps. And what we realize is that there are men out there who want to see each other's face. They want to talk to each other. They don't want to just have a back and forth lewd images. So I think it's just about respecting these communities instead of treating them as just some niche to be dealt with while you satisfy the whims of the white patriarchy, for lack of a better term.
Well, that just is awesome. Darren, do you want to build on that? It's a hard act to follow.
Yeah. Next question.
Well, let's go back to talk about what you were seeing trend-wise that you think Bermuda could learn from. Reflecting that each of you, to some extent, have sort of one foot on the off-island world and at least a toe on island. From your perspective and where you're sitting, what ways do you think Bermuda's tourism industry needs to change? What do we need to do differently out here?
I would say that I think a little bit about sort of one of my first clients, and and this is someone who together we've branded 3 James Beard Award-winning restaurants. And I was talking to him one time about sort of how does he find staff, how does he enroll people into the business, and he looks at me and he says, Darren, you can't teach hustle. And, and it really sort of struck me, but I do think that you can inspire it, and I think that, with the things that we're talking about wanting to do, it really requires that we come up with ways in which that we can sort of enroll others into this sense of mission. That everyone is sort of taking on the work that we're looking to do with the same level of urgency. And parts of that have to do with sort of the stories that we tell about sort of the work that we do. I think it has to do with ways in which we're able to sort of make this work as meaningful as it possibly can be. And I think that, it isn't something that we're going to sort of figure out, in the next year. It really is something that is something that's built over time.
Okay. Richard, do you want to answer the same question?
Sure. So what I've seen is that the guest experience is kind of evolving, right? And there's 3 C's that I think are very important for hotel operators to consider, which is communication, choice, and then convenience as well. So communication, right? It's so important, just with technology and being able to be in contact with the guest from the pre-arrival experience, even from the time of booking, right? What does that look like all the way up to the arrival here on site, throughout the guest stay, and then after. It's so important, and I think Airbnb does a fantastic job of that, just connecting the property owners to potential guests, and it's why they've been so successful, I think. Convenience is something that is so important and so crucial. I think hotels traditionally have been designed where the guests kind of are around the staff, if you will, and they have to go toward the staff to kind of get information, to get assistance. We have to change that model and make it more so it's outreach to the guest, right? Gone are the days where you just come to the front desk to check in with an agent, or you go to the concierge desk. It's much more immersive and innovative in the sense that you need to have options and choices available to your guests. And what I mean by that is you can have a traditional front desk experience, but you should also have a kiosk in the lobby where a guest can come up who doesn't want that interaction with an employee after a late flight, and they really just want to hit a button, select their room, get a key, go upstairs, limited interaction, because that's something that travelers want now. So I think investment in technology here is super important. I think Bermuda is a little bit behind when it comes to that in terms of the product that I've seen abroad. And for any owners that are in the room, because it's really the conversation with them to get the financing for it. But I really think the way to go is to invest more in technology, because that's where the industry is going in terms of guest engagement.
Mm-hmm. Claire, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, it's a really small thing. I was just thinking of it just now. I was just looking through, again, some data before this because I wanted to pull some relevant stats. Again, not a massive point, but I know this is not just specific to Bermuda. This is specific to a lot of holiday destinations, but I've really noticed that younger millennials and Gen Z are gravitating away from alcohol. I've got to tell you, a lot of the content on our site that does the best is about sober curious dating, which is, sober curious is a thing, alcohol-free dating. No, it is. And they're gravitating towards, there's a reason why these kind of CBD-filled drinks are doing so well. As you know as well as anybody, all things wellness and self-care are huge, and waking up with a hangover is just really not it for this younger generation. So I wonder whether, and I love a swizzle as much as the next gal, but I wonder whether there are ways to pivot slightly away from the kind of boozy happy hour, fun in the sun, a little bit just for the younger generation, and to show them that, there's more to Bermuda than a dark and stormy, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for other activities that don't involve getting drunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I could just add.
Please.
As I think a little bit about even just sort of the trend towards, conspicuous authenticity, and sort of the ways in which that drives everything. It's that you want to have, this particular vacation and this particular location and having these sets of experiences and what have you. And that applies whether it's a vacation or whether it's a piece of cheese or whether it's something else, And I think that oftentimes what you'll find inside of that is that there's a common denominator. Typically there's a singular focus. There's an incredible book by Francis Fry that I'd recommend to anyone in the room called Uncommon Service. And, and part of the argument inside of the book is that if you really want to be world-class at something, oftentimes the temptation is to get great at one thing or get great at one or two things, and then to try to focus on many others, her idea is that if you're really good at something, just focus on trying to get even better at that one thing. And sort of relax a little bit and try to be okay with not being as good or as focused or as accomplished with those other things. And I think that oftentimes, that's what really leads to an exceptional product or something that someone's really willing to pay a premium for or tell a story about.
Building a little bit more on this theme about being genuine. The Bermuda Tourism Authority and the National Tourism Plan has a goal to double the number of African Americans that are visiting Bermuda every year, and that sounds amazing until we say that's from 4% to 8%. But we really believe that Bermuda ought to have and has the potential to have a product that really connects with an African American audience. Following this theme about being genuine and being ever better at one thing, what are your thoughts on what Bermuda needs to do if we want to realize that vision?
Sure. Do you want me or do you
I-
want to take?
I think that's a huge untapped market for Bermuda in getting African Americans here. It's also been a challenge in New York City for, say, a luxury hotel or lifestyle property trying to attract those guests. And what we've done prior to me going to the assemblage, but at one of my other companies, Highgate, is doing diversity training with the employees and getting them to understand the various different backgrounds of anybody who comes through the door and how you interact with them, because unfortunately we found ourselves in situations where involuntarily one would treat someone different just based on who they are, how they appear. So we did diversity training to really get the team members to understand that we are different, we are unique, and service should not change based on that. I think as well you have to create experiences that are tailored toward certain demographics as well. And at the assemblage, right, what we've done really well, at least for the membership side of things, is bring in practitioners that are familiar to the African American community, right? Because I think with like the Noy Houses of the world, the WeWorks, we've tend to not be as inclusive as we can be. And so at the assemblage, we've kind of done things differently. And so we will invite, a panel of just African American women talking about their issues and really opening that up to everyone so that they can be exposed to people they might not usually interact with. So that's worked well for us in the co-working side of things.
Yeah, I would also say, taking inspiration from other organizations or other products that have been able to serve a specific audience exceptionally well. I think a bit about, a brand like The Wing, for instance, and sort of what they've done in terms of, developing a co-working platform, really focused on sort of how do you empower women, of all types. And doing it in a way that is authentic, doing it in a way that is incredibly cool and fresh and feels anything like the sort of sometimes bro-y culture of WeWork. I would say that certainly if this is something that we're serious about wanting to explore, also just being incredibly intentional in terms of whether it's sort of a campaign that you develop, whether it's sort of the imagery that you create, sort of looking at sort of ways in which you're able to sort of tailor or adjust some of the existing product or services that we might be looking to offer. Certainly those are things that seem like they would go a long way as well.
And I'd just like to add one more thing. I think Victoria was touching on this in terms of production for television and things. I think there are so many opportunities that we miss out on for an island. Certain reality TV shows that showcase destinations is key also, right? The African American population is very tuned in to what's going on TV, so I think that's a huge avenue for us to explore as well by marketing the island through that means.
Oh, good. Okay. We've talked a lot about the next generation of visitors, but let's talk about the next generation of Bermudians and Bermudian workers. What do you think the employers in the room need to be thinking about as they think about attracting Bermudians into this industry?
So at Proverb, we actually think a lot about, how do we create a high quality experience in both directions? And really sort of thinking about sort of the talent, or our team first, sort of what is it that they're actually looking to sort of to get out of this work experience, and how do we support them in the development of new skills? We invest pretty heavily in their professional development. There's a tremendous amount of flexibility that we try to offer in terms of sort of how work gets done, where work gets done. We have unlimited vacation. And so we've really tried to sort of think a great deal about, how do you compete as effectively as you can for the same talent. If you think about, an app like Bumble, they're competing for the same talent as Bank of America. Bumble's app needs to work as well as Bank of America's app. And the workspace that you create needs to support that. 78% of millennials tell you that the quality of their work experience is as important as the work that they do. And so I would say that for employers, sort of really thinking about your brand as an employer, sort of thinking about the experience that you are able to provide, and if you're really able to take care of the people, those people will take care of those people.
I know it can sometimes be difficult talking about paid leave and parental leave, especially if you're a small business. At Bumble, we're lucky in that we do have the infrastructure to be able to provide competitive parental leave, but I really think, listen, millennials are going to be turning 40 soon. The oldest millennial was born in '81. Millennials are having kids, they have toddlers. I think that the most competitive advantage you can have is being really intentional about how you put together your parental leave plans and your policies for people who want to work flexibly. Can they work at home on Friday? Are you going to make a fuss if the nanny's sick and they have to work from home? I think it's all well and good to have kombucha on tap, which obviously we're a startup, we have kombucha on tap. But the bigger policies that affect your life, they matter the most.
A lot of us don't even know what that is.
Delicious.
I'm going to agree and say that for employees, and especially millennials, we're looking for companies that we identify with in terms of our values. For me, joining the assemblage, it was so important, the whole wellness aspect of things, being able to disconnect from my workday halfway throughout the day and take a breathwork session to kind of get myself centered, to have a team that wants to invest in you, not just professionally, but personally. Those things are so important. I think here in Bermuda, maybe there needs to be a bit more emphasis on training and supporting young Bermudians through educational opportunities. And we talk about these things a lot, but oftentimes it's not put into action, like Kevin's reference earlier about plans. So that's something I would like to see change here, and it can be done through apprenticeships, mentorships, and whether that's bringing Bermudians abroad back home to assist with that. But I think the mindset also, maybe for partners and stakeholders, needs to shift a bit and realize that Bermudians can do some of these more senior jobs and roles. I'm a prime example of that. With some time and investment in individuals, they can perform, right? They just need the tools and resources to do so.
So I have two more questions, but before we get to that, and recognizing that there's 15 minutes between all of you and happy hour, are there questions from the audience for our panel? I can't see from up here. Anybody see any questions? You see a hand? There we go. Oh, that's better.
Good day, Vanessa Bean from OBMI. This is directed to Darren. Thank you for your story with reference to your father and saying that you can't return. It's a reality, and I've seen it in a lot of my friends and even in myself. What is your advice to existing employers who have summer students coming to work? What would be your advice to try to entice young people to come back to Bermuda? Because we have a problem now where we have well-educated Bermudians who are not returning for various reasons, and I think that we are going to lose those assets, and it's going to affect us in the future.
Oh, thank you for that. You know, I would say that, you know, certainly the Bermuda that I grew up in is different from the Bermuda of today. You know, and I think that, you know, certainly technology plays an enormous role, both in terms of one's ability to connect, but also sort of one's ability to find community or to affect change here on the island. You know, so in many ways, I feel like the argument that was made to me, you know, isn't necessarily entirely true. You know, that being said, you know, I think that, you know, our consumers are coming from all over the world, you know, and if you're going to have someone pay, you know, $500 a night, $800 a night, $1,000 a night, this probably isn't the first time that they've done it. You know, they've done it before. They have a set of expectations in terms of sort of what that should look like, what service should look like, you know, what needs to be delivered. And I would say that, you know, to the degree to which sort of one can do whatever they can to be able to sort of broaden their set of experiences, you know, and to be able to have the widest possible data set to be able to pull upon or respond to or service, I think would make a great deal of sense. You know, I would say that for Bermudians who have already returned, you know, the reality is that, you know, you're always learning. You're always trying to figure out how to improve. You know, if something's not broken, you can still fix it. You know, and so I would say, you know, a lot of it really comes down to being able to stay inspired and keep a fire in your belly.
Any other questions for our panel? All righty. Well, I have another question, and then we'll wrap up. And I think you were actually touching on it already, but I'd love to hear from each of you on what advice would you give to young Bermudians thinking about entering this industry, or even mid-career Bermudians who are thinking about changing lanes?
I can't speak specifically to tourism because I've not worked in it, but I can say that there's this sort of misconception that in order to live well in Bermuda, you have to work in reinsurance, you have to be an Excel spreadsheet jockey. You don't. You are all testament to that there are careers out there for creative folks. You don't have, you could be left-brained or right-brained. And I think that, you know, it's important that those of us who are in creative fields, I know I have a mentee in New York that I see at the Wing, actually, Women's Club you mentioned, to bring up the young folks that you think would be great. If you spot a summer student that you're like, oh, okay, yeah, he or she is going to be incredible in this company, be a mentor. You have no idea what that one coffee date every quarter could mean to them. I think it's just about sort of showing rather than telling, explaining to them the good, the bad, and the ugly of the job, how exciting it is for you to be doing what you're doing. And I think also, I mean, everything that you've spoken about today speaks for itself. The future of tourism in Bermuda is really bright. They should want to be part of that.
Want to take it first?
Sure. So I would say that this is a super exciting industry to be a part of. When I got into hospitality, I thought it was all about service. And that's a huge part of what it means to be in hospitality, but it's not all of it. There are many different disciplines within the hotel industry that one can venture into. There's finance, there's sales and marketing, there's branding, there's revenue management, there's asset management from an ownership perspective. So you can really do whatever you want within hospitality, and there's the option to travel. I think that, but with that, there's a responsibility on the senior leadership of the hotels here, as well as the owners, to be willing to invest in Bermudians, to give them those different opportunities, and maybe not just limit anyone who's looking to get involved to the service positions, if you will. But I will say it's been a fantastic journey for me thus far, being able to create, being able to brand hotels, engaging with guests, leading teams, which is probably my favorite part, being responsible for the overall performance of a team, inspiring others. I would agree with Claire that you just have to get it out of your mind that law and finance are really the best ways to live in Bermuda, or generate the most in terms of a disposable income. And that starts at home, right? It starts with parents and grandparents shifting their mindset. And as well for people in the workforce, that a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday work week is what is normal, right? In New York, people work at different times throughout the day and on the weekend. And you make certain sacrifices to be presented with other opportunities. So I would just say, think about things a little differently.
And I guess I would just underscore just the velocity of change that's happening within the industry. You know, if you look at what's happened sort of in and around hospitality, particularly in the US over the last 15 years, and the increasing sophistication of those consumers, you look at what reality TV has done for hospitality. You look at, you know, in terms of sort of just an awareness or the desire that consumers have to sort of find things that are either better or different. You know, and I would also say that there are skills that are sort of very much transferable to other industries. You know, and so, you know, more and more so, you know, particularly with millennials, you know, careers are somewhat episodic, you know, and so I've done this, and then I'm doing this, and then I'm doing this. You know, I would say that, you know, for me, even growing up in Bermuda and sort of that early exposure, you know, had a significant impact on sort of the work that I do at Proverb and sort of the ways in which we try to service our clients.
That's fantastic. Okay, let's wrap up there. Thank you to our panel for coming home and sharing your wisdom with us. You guys may as well stay put for 1 minute. And so stay put for 1 minute, then we're out of here. All that is left for me to do is to say thank you to all of you. And thank you to the BTA team that worked incredibly hard to put this event on. So three closing thoughts for you, because there must always be three. The first is that hopefully you took away from today that, you know, some headwinds aside, the National Tourism Plan is well underway, and it is the right long-term plan for our future. Progress won't always be in a straight line, but we know we're moving in the right direction. The second takeaway for me today was really tying the whole day together. This morning I lectured a little bit on people's behavior on social media, and then sort of in the middle of the day, we heard about the kids on the bus who inspired visitors to come here every year for 40 years by giving up their seat. And to close out the day here, we talked about the importance of being genuine. And for me, the takeaway from that is that the BTA can market all we want, but really Bermuda's product is all of us, and actually everything we say and everything we do is the brand. And so it's incumbent upon all of us to remember that all the time. The third thought is we're not quite done. We have crossover networking session now with the folks from Tech Week, so I would invite everybody to take their stuff and head out of here straight across the lobby to the far end and out the doors onto what's called the Great Lawn. And we have drinks set up for you, and the folks from BTA and their friends are on the way. Thank you very much, everyone. Cheers. Thank you.